The game of basketball is completely different today than what it was 10 or 15 years ago. Things like skill level, Euro step, the gather. I mean, who ever heard of these things 10, 15 years ago? And now they are prevalent today. Positionless basketball has taken over. The elimination of the big man. We've talked about that before. It's almost non existent to use a post player. The girls' game is starting to catch up as well. I'm here talking today with my good friend, Cory Norman, who's the girls' basketball coach at our alma mater, Jeffersonville High School in Indiana. So we're here talking all things how the game has changed, what's going on in the future. We're just talking good basketball today. Let's get into this. All right. Thank you, Cory, for joining us today, man, and talking a little basketball, man. What's going on?
Nothing much. Thanks for having me.
No problem. No problem. Now, just to give people a little bit of background here, me and Cory have pretty much been joined at the hip since what? We were about 9 years old?
Maybe a couple of years earlier.
Right. So, just growing up, playing basketball together, playing it in Indiana is a huge thing. People underestimate that. And as we get older, I moved away, you've gone, and now you're back at Jeffersonville coaching the girls. Indiana high school basketball is a special, special thing. Kind of tell me your thoughts on Indiana basketball as a whole.
I think it's very unique. It's known nationwide. Also being right above Kentucky, they have a real rich environment with basketball and everything.
Yep.
It's just kind of like it's the middle of the Midwest, and everything kind of goes through here. I mean, Indiana's a unique place.
Absolutely. I always tell people, the corridor for everybody always talks about Tobacco Road being, Indiana basketball. I'm like, no, not really. I go, you look at it, there is Kentucky, Louisville, and IU, and even if you want to go a little bit further to Purdue, to Lafayette, I go, and that corridor is really where the blue blood of college basketball is. I don't want to hear this Tobacco Road, Duke, and North Carolina. Those are two programs. We got more than that, and with just as much tradition, if not more, than all of it.
True. And up to a couple of years ago, I mean, we had one class. I mean, now we have class ball, but that was very unique.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where the separation comes when it comes to Indiana high school basketball. So,
correct.
Having said that, let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about the eras of basketball. I know me and you have those conversations all the time, man. Tell me what era, number one, that you think is best, but whether they play the best actual basketball, because me and you are real basketball people. I wasn't athletic. So what in your eyes is the best as far as the era are concerned, and why?
I think the 90s was probably the best era.
Okay.
I believe the 90s is when it was most competitive. The desire to win was higher. It was less about entertainment. You might see a dunk or you might see a fight. I mean, either one. I mean, it just had a little bit of everything.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is, you might see a dunk, you might see a fight, you might see a guy go for 40, you might see the score be 120, but then you might see it in the mid 80s, depending on how the game was going. I like the 90s too, man. I prefer a little bit more faster pace, getting up and down a little bit more. But I like 90s basketball. They were allowed to play defense. Right now, they don't allow you to play defense.
That's true. And plus in the 90s, I mean, you had an era that I mentioned to you before that there was a crossover. I mean, you've got everybody from Allen Iverson, Kobe, to Michael Jordan, all the way down to the old guys. Well, we call old guys now, but during that era, they were all kind of in their prime or they were coming up.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the difference. It was it was a crossover because you had Jordan. Well, even in the late 90s, I know Magic and Bird were pretty much finished. But they were there. And then you had Jordan. Right. And then, even AI and what he brought. It was just the 90s had so many superstars. It's just and great players. Great basketball players, not necessarily just athletes playing basketball, which I think that's a lot of today. More basketball players back in those days than just pure basketball players versus now. I think the guys now are more skilled than previously, but I think they were just basketball players in previous eras versus now. Tell me what you think, because right now it seems like it's all positionless basketball.
I think sometimes they call it skilled. Sometimes I call it tricks.
Okay.
Kind of like a little lesser version of and one,
Okay.
like the hard and hop. I mean, I think that's travel. I
There
mean,
you go.
back in the day, that didn't work.
It didn't work.
And I just think back in the day it was more hard nose, get to the basket and just playing basketball. I mean, and just there was fundamentals, but really I think the game lost its fundamentals because back in the day, a travel was a travel, and today it's not.
Today is not. And that's kind of the difference. And look, I like today's basketball. I like see him getting up and down and shoot. I go, but some stuff, it's like, okay, when did this gather step become a thing? Like, what do you mean a gather step?
Between that and the Euro, I'm confused. And I think a lot of younger kids are confused. They don't know when to do it, when not to do it. You can literally go through a layup motion and just stop, and then take
Correct.
another step and then shoot. I don't understand.
I don't understand it, man. I don't get it. And I know this makes us sound like we're a bunch of old heads and all that. First of all, 47,
Eh,
you're 46. I'm not, I don't think that classifies us as old heads, but if it does, it does. It is what it
Hey,
is.
I know what I grew up watching, and today's game is not it.
It's not it. It's not it. And my thing is the whole positionless basketball thing. Now, look, you coach girls basketball in Indiana. You use a post player. You will throw the ball in the post. Why don't, and I know in girls basketball, they use a post player way more than what they do in men's basketball. Tell me what is the reason that you don't think, other than they're not taught to be big, that big men are not taught to be big men anymore. Why is that? What, tell me the reason, what you think.
Well, I mean, being like you said, the old guys, I just think that they're softer now. I think when Shaq came in and when certain players came in the league, they changed rules a little bit to make
Right.
other people be able to play. Shaq was obviously a phenom; he was a
Right.
beast. And since him, I mean, who's been a dominant player like that? So the rules kind of changed. But I mean, I like the original post guy, the powerness and dunking and moving people. But today's game is more finesse.
Correct. It's more finesse. Um, the way I look at it, like I said, the positionless basketball, I still think I like that part of it, but I still think you need a big man.
Yeah,
Throw the ball inside. The first thing that we learn, Corey, as basketball players, when you're a big guy, when you get the rebound, run. That
yep,
is the first thing that they teach a big guy. Run. Run to the rim, and you will get you 3 or 4 baskets just because you are the first guy down there and the guard will throw you the ball. They don't even do that anymore.
No, I mean people think big guys can't run. I mean Shaq, Akeem Olajuwon, Kareem, I mean David Robinson, Tim Duncan, they all ran. So
Absolutely.
that's a myth. So
Absolutely. And that's the thing. And now you don't see the big guys running because they're like, why am I going to run all the way down here and be the first guy down the court and you don't even throw me the ball?
exactly.
They're not going to do that. And there's countless videos that you can look up and people just critiquing basketball saying, look at the big man. Look at the big man run. They don't throw it to him.
No,
Not only that, they'll even make that first pass. You know how we used to run the break, the sideline break. You throw it to the first guy on the corner. The big man is standing under the goal with a guard on his back.
yep,
They don't throw him the ball.
nope.
I think it's crazy, man, how they don't use a big man anymore.
And sometimes I think maybe they don't do that anymore because maybe big guys today choose to handle the ball more because they don't pass on the ball inside. So
That's
I'm gonna be
absolutely
a guard.
right. That's a good point, is that they don't do enough, don't spend enough time being a big man. You're big, be
Right.
big. It's
Yep.
okay to be big. And I think a lot of times people and coaches, they get big guys thinking, it's not a good thing to be big anymore. And I think that's the absolute opposite of that.
We were small, yet we were big when we played.
Correct. 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 And so that kind of leads me to the players' mentality these days. Um, and I know you see it, like I said, on a daily basis, but high school is different than college, and it's definitely different than pros. So dealing just on an NBA type of level, and what you see versus what it used to be. Tell me the guy's mentality to me is just different.
I think back in the day when they made hundreds of thousands of dollars, they played hard. Now they make millions of dollars and they don't have to play as hard. Because once they get all these guaranteed contracts, I mean, it's just what it is. It's just business and entertainment.
Well, and you hear the take of, well, they make all these hundreds of millions of dollars, so the teams are protecting their assets, and then you hear the science behind it says not to play, and I'm like, you know what? I can get behind that if it was a back to backs, and you know what, guys coming off an injury or all of this, and you know what, back to back games, okay, fine. But when the guy doesn't play, one game, and then he goes and plays the next 10 straight without injury, tell me again what science is telling you. What science says go do that?
I don't think they're hungry anymore. What I love the most is when you bring a guy from the G League
Right?
who appreciates it. He's got to earn that time. I got one game. And when
Right.
they play their butts off.
Correct. Correct. And that's the thing is that they sign those 2-way contracts or those 10-day contracts. Those guys, they're playing for a job. They
Right.
are hungry playing for a job. And it becomes more difficult. And I get that. When you're making hundreds of millions of dollars, it becomes more difficult. But I think that's what separates the great players from the good players. Just my philosophy. That's just what I think. And like I say, getting back to the playing style, positionless basketball. I mean, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't even think people had really even heard of positionless basketball. Do you think it hurts or it helps the game?
I think it hurts because I think when you don't have positions, more guys tend to stand around. And where when you had a job to do, you had a place to be at, and you played off of each other. It's different now. A lot of guys just stand around and they watch somebody go one on one, and that's kind of what you get.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So a couple of other questions here. And this was one I told some people that I was going to interview today, and they sent in a couple of questions. So I said, I'll ask Cory.
Uh-oh.
So difference between the biggest thing that you see now that you're coaching girls basketball, what is the difference? No, I'm not talking about, well, matter of fact, let me just ask, and you tell me, what are 2-3 of the big differences that you see between the two?
Between boys and girls?
Yes.
I think one of the biggest issues is a lot of girls have been coached as girls. And to me,
Gotcha.
the goal is still 10 foot. The court is still the same size court. And you just shouldn't brainwash them into thinking that way. And my big thing this year was girls or boys, we're just playing. And I don't look at it and say, well, they can't do that because they're girls. I mean, I did a lot of stuff that we did in high school, and
Right.
they bought into it, and that's just what they bought into, and it worked out pretty good.
Absolutely. And that's a great point, Cory, is because if you coach them to be a certain way, they'll be a certain way versus, hey, they're basketball players. I understand their physical limitations, but you know what? Guys have physical limitations too. I couldn't jump. I couldn't dunk. That wasn't my thing, but you still got to go play basketball.
Correct.
So that's a great point, man. Great point. Tell me, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say what you look forward to, but other than just that, are there some advantages to coaching girls versus boys and vice versa?
I think there are. I think when girls play and they're bought into what's going on, they do it and they love doing it. Where boys sometimes they get caught up in their own little things, and you got to reel them back in. But for the most
Right.
part, the girls show up, and then when they play, they play. You don't have to convince them to do anything. They're doing it because they like doing it. And with boys, sometimes we get distracted.
Yes, we
We have
do.
other things going on.
Yes, we
So,
do.
so yeah.
I understand, man. I understand. But anyway, Cory, I want to thank you again, man, for joining us today, bro. I mean, we've known each other forever. Like I said, we've been linked at the hip for 40 years, man. And you've been a brother to me. I love you. I can't thank you enough for joining. And it makes my heart happy. You're back at Jeff, coaching basketball, what you
Appreciate
love
it.
to do, man. Anything that you want to add?
I appreciate Jeffersonville High School and the opportunity they gave me to come back home and just give back to the community and the girls, and and just support all of our sports. And I think our principal and administration, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. And we'll have you back on as soon as possible, man, to talk some more basketball. Thank you.
Thank you.